Hello, and welcome back to Let's Play The Elder Scrolls 3, Morrowind, Game of the Year Edition. Once again, it is story time. Fedar's got some reading to do.
A warm welcome, Fedar.
We'll be starting in Mushmir's shack.
Yes, honored guest.
Excuse me. I want to read this. First Seed, Book 3 of 2920, The Last Year of the First Era, by Karlovac Townway. 15th of First Seed, 2920, Kersuvio, Cyrodiil. From their vantage point high in the hills, the Emperor Riemann III could still see the spires of the imperial city, but he knew he was far away from hearth and home. Lord Glavius had a luxurious villa, but it was not close to being large enough to house the entire army within its walls. Tents lined the hillsides, and the soldiers were flocking to enjoy his lordship's famous hot springs. Little wonder, winter chills still hung in the air. Prince Juilek, your son, is not feeling well. When Potentate Versaduce spoke, the Emperor jumped. How that Akavir could slither across the grass without making a sound was a mystery to him. Poisoned, I'd wager, grumbled Riemann. See to it he gets a healer. I told him to hire a taster like I have, but the boy's headstrong. There are spies all around us. I know it. I believe you're right, Your Imperial Majesty, said Versaduce. These are treacherous times, and we must take precautions to see that Morrowind does not win this war, either on the field or by more insidious means. That is why I would suggest that you not lead the vanguard into battle. I know you would want to, as your illustrious ancestors Riemann I, Brazalis Dor, and Riemann II did, but I fear it would be foolhardy. I hope you do not mind me speaking frankly like this. No, nodded Riemann. I think you're right. Who would lead the vanguard, then? I would say Prince Juilek, if he were feeling better, replied the Akavir. Failing that, Storig of Farrun, with Queen Nagia of Riverhold at left flank, and War Chief Ulach of Lilmoth at right flank. A Khajiit at left flank and an Argonian at right, frowned the Emperor. I never do trust beast folk. The Potentate took no offense. He knew that beast folk referred to the natives of Tamriel, not to the Seishi of Akavir like himself. I quite agree, Your Imperial Majesty, but you must agree that they hate the Dunmer. Ulach has a particular grudge after all the slave raids on his lands by the Duke of Mournhold. The Emperor conceded it was so, and the Potentate retired. It was surprising, thought Riemann, but for the first time, the Potentate seemed trustworthy. He was a good man to have on one's side. 18th of First Seed, 2920. Ald Erfaud, Morrowind. How far is the Imperial army? Asked Vivek. 2 days' march, replied his lieutenant. If we march all night tonight, we can get higher ground at the Prii tomorrow morning. Our intelligence tells us the Emperor will be commanding the rear, Storig of Farrun has the vanguard, Nagia of Riverhold at left flank, and Ulach of Lilmoth at right flank. Ulach, whispered Vivek, an idea forming. Is this intelligence reliable? Who brought it to us? A Breton spy in the Imperial army, said the lieutenant, and gestured towards a young, sandy-haired man who stepped forward and bowed to Vivek. What is your name, and why is a Breton working for us against the Cyrodiils? Asked Vivek, smiling. My name is Casser Whitley of Dwynnen, said the man, and I am working for you because not everyone can say he spied for a god. And I understood it would be, well, profitable. Vivek laughed. It will be, if your information is accurate. 19th of First Seed, 2920. Bodrum, Morrowind. The quiet hamlet of Bodrum looked down on the meandering river, the Prii. It was an idyllic sight, lightly wooded where the water took the bend around a steep bluff to the east with a gorgeous wildflower meadow to the west. The strange flora of Morrowind met the strange flora of Cyrodiil on the border and commingled gloriously. There will be time to sleep when you've finished. The soldiers had been hearing that all morning. It was not enough that they had been marching all night. Now they were chopping down trees on the bluff and damming the river so its waters spilled over. Most of them had reached the point where they were too tired to complain about being tired. Let me be certain I understand, my lord, said Vivek's lieutenant. We take the bluff so we can fire arrows and spells down on them from above. That's why we need all the trees cleared out. Damming the river floods the plain below, so they'll be trudging through mud, which should hamper their movement. That's exactly half of it, said Vivek approvingly. He grabbed a nearby soldier who was hauling off the trees. Wait, I need you to break off the straightest, strongest branches of the trees and whittle them into spears. If you recruit 100 or so others, it won't take you more than a few hours to make all we need. The soldier wearily did as he was bade. The men and women got to work, fashioning spears from the trees. If you don't mind me asking, said the lieutenant, the soldiers don't need any more weapons. They're too tired to hold the ones they've got. These spears aren't for holding, said Vivek and whispered. If we tired them out today, they'll get a good night's sleep tonight, before he got to work supervising their work. It was essential that they be sharp, of course, but equally important that they be well-balanced and tapered proportionally. The perfect point for stability was a pyramid, not the conical point of some lances and spears. He had the men hurl the spears they had completed to test their strength, sharpness, and balance, forcing them to begin on a new one if they broke. Gradually, out of sheer exhaustion from doing it wrong, the men learned how to create the perfect wooden spears. Once they were through, he showed them how they were to be arranged and where. That night, there was no drunken pre-battle carousing, and no nervous neophytes stayed up worrying about the battle to come. As soon as the sun sank beneath the wooded hills, the camp was at rest, but for the sentries. 20th of 1st Seed, 2920. Bodrum, Morrowind. Miramor was exhausted. For the last 6 days, he had gambled and whored all night and then marched all day. He was looking forward to the battle, but even more than that, he was looking forward to some rest afterwards. He was in the Emperor's command at the rear flank, which was good because it seemed unlikely that he would be killed. On the other hand, it meant traveling over the mud and waste the army ahead left in their wake. As they began the trek through the wildflower field, Miramor and all the soldiers around him sank ankle-deep in cold mud. It was an effort to even keep moving. Far, far up ahead, he could see the vanguard of the army led by Lord Storig emerging from the meadow at the base of a bluff. That was when it all happened. An army of Dunmer appeared above the bluff like rising Daedra, pouring fire and floods of arrows down on the vanguard. Simultaneously, a company of men bearing the flag of the Duke of Mournhold galloped around the shore, disappearing along the shallow river's edge where it dipped to a timbered glen to the east. Warchief Ulach, nearby on the right flank, let out a bellow of revenge at the sight and gave chase. Queen Nagia sent her flank towards the embankment to the west to intercept the army on the bluff. The Emperor could think of nothing to do. His troops were too bogged down to move forward quickly and join the battle. He ordered them to face east towards the timber, in case Mournhold's company was trying to circle around through the woods. They never came out, but many men, facing west, missed the battle entirely. Miramor kept his eyes on the bluff. A tall Dunmer he supposed must have been Vivek gave a signal, and the battle mages cast their spells at something to the west. From what transpired, Miramor deduced it was a dam. A great torrent of water spilled out, washing Nagia's left flank into the remains of the vanguard, and the two together downriver to the east. The Emperor paused, as if waiting for his vanquished army to return, and then called a retreat. Miramor hid in the rushes until they had passed by, and then waded as quietly as he could to the bluff. The Morrowind army was retiring as well back to their camp. He could hear them celebrating above him as he paddled along the shore. To the east, he saw the Imperial army. They had been washed into a net of spears strung across the river, Nagia's left flank on Storig's vanguard on Ulach's right flank, bodies of hundreds of soldiers strung together like beads. Miramor took whatever valuables he could carry from the corpses and then ran down the river. He had to go many miles before the water was clear again, unpolluted by blood. 29th of 1st Seed, 2920. Hegaeth, Hammerfell. You have a letter from the Imperial City, said the chief priestess, handing the parchment to Corda. All the young priestesses smiled and made faces of astonishment, but the truth was that Corda's sister Rija wrote very often, at least once a month. Corda took the letter to the garden to read it, her favorite place, an oasis in the monochromatic sand-colored world of the conservatorium. The letter itself was nothing unusual, filled with court gossip, the latest fashions which were tending to wine-dark velvets, and reports of the Emperor's ever-growing paranoia. "You are so lucky to be away from all of this," wrote Rija. "The Emperor is convinced that his latest battlefield fiasco is all a result of spies in the palace. He has even taken to questioning me. Ruptka, keep it so you never have a life as interesting as mine." Corda listened to the sounds of the desert and prayed to Ruptka the exact opposite wish. The year is continued in Rain's hand. Okay. Now, Fedar needs to get back to Balmora. Let's make that happen. Excellent. The next book is in the Fighters Guild.
Today's your lucky day.
Is it? Well, that sounds good.
What can I help you with?
You can't help me right now. I'm looking for a book of mine called The Cake and the Diamond. The Cake and the Diamond by Athen Mwendil. I was in the Rat and the Pot, a foreigner corner club in Aldroon, talking to my fellow rats when I first saw the woman. Now, Breton women are fairly common in the Rat and the Pot. As a breed, they seem inclined to wander far from their perches in High Rock. Old Breton women, however, are not so migratory, and the wizened old biddy drew attention to herself, wandering about the room, talking to everyone. Nimloth and Ediad were at their usual places, drinking their usual stuff. Ediad was showing off a prize he had picked up in some illicit manner. A colossal diamond, large as a baby's hand, and clear as spring water. I was admiring it when I heard the creaking of old bones behind me. "Good day to you, friends," said the old woman. "My name is Abel Credit, and I am in need of financial assistance to facilitate my transportation to Aldredania." "You'll want to see the Temple for charity," said Nimloth curtly. "I am not looking for charity," said Abel. "I'm looking to barter services." "Don't make me sick, old woman," laughed Ediad. "Did you say your name was Abel Credit?" I asked. "Are you related to Abel Credit, the High Rock alchemist?" "Closely related," she said with a cackle. "We are the same person." "Perhaps I could prepare you a potion in exchange for gold? I noticed that you have in your possession a very fine diamond. The magical qualities of diamonds are boundless." "Sorry, old woman. I ain't giving it up for magic. It was trouble enough stealing this one," said Ediad. "I've got a fence who will trade it for gold. But your fence will demand a certain percentage, will he not? What if I could give you a potion of invisibility in exchange? In return for that diamond, you could have the means to steal many more. A very fair exchange of services, I would say." "It would be, but I have no gold to give you," said Ediad. "I'll take what remains of the diamond after I've made the potion," said Abel. "If you took it to the Mages Guild, you'd have to supply all the other ingredients and pay for it as well. But I learned my craft in the wild, where no potion makers existed to dissolve diamonds into dust. When you must do it all by hand, by simple skill, you are blessed with remnants those fool potion makers at the guild simply swallow up." "That sounds all very nice," said Nimloth. "But how do we know your potion is going to work? If you make one potion, take the rest of Ediad's diamond, and leave, we won't know until you've gone whether the potion works or not." Trust is so rare these days," sighed Abel. "I suppose I could make 2 potions for you, and there'd still be a little bit of the diamond left for me. Not a lot, but perhaps enough to get me to Aldredania. Then you could try the first potion right here and now, and see if you're satisfied or not." "But," I interjected, "you could make one potion that works and one that doesn't, and take more of the diamond. She could even give you a slow-acting poison, and by the time she got to Aldredania, you'd be dead." "Bleedin' Kinnereth, you Dunmer are suspicious. I will hardly have any diamond left, but I could make 2 potions of 2 doses each, so you can satisfy yourself that the potion works and has no negative effects. If you still don't trust me, come along with me to my table and witness my craft if you'd like." So it was decided that I would accompany Abel back to her table where she had all her traveling bags full of herbs and minerals to make certain that she was not making 2 different potions. It took nearly an hour of preparation, but she kindly allowed me to finish her half-filled flagon of wine while I watched her work. Splintering the diamond and powdering the pieces required the bulk of the time. Over and over again, she waved her gnarled hands over the gem, intoning ancient enchantments, breaking the facets of the stone into smaller and smaller pieces. Separately, she made pastes of minced bitter green, crushed red bulbs of Delarco Spe, and driblets of Siciliani oil. I finished the wine. "Old woman," I finally said with a sigh, "how much longer is this going to take? I'm getting tired of watching you work." "The Mages Guild has fooled the populace into thinking alchemy is a science," she said. "But if you're tired, rest your eyes." My eyes closed, seemingly of their own volition. But there had been something in that wine, something that made me do what she asked. "I think I'll make up the potion as cakes. It's much more potent that way. Now, tell me, young man, what will your friends do once I give them the potion?" "Mug you in the street afterwards to retrieve the rest of the diamond," I said simply. I didn't want to tell the truth, but there it was. I thought so, but I wanted to be certain. "You may open your eyes now." I opened my eyes. Abel had made a small presentation on a wooden platter, 2 small cakes and a silver cutting knife. "Pick up the cakes and bring them to the table," said Abel. "And don't say anything, except to agree with whatever I say." I did as I was told. It was a curious sensation. I didn't really mind being her puppet. Of course, in retrospect, I resent it, but it seemed perfectly natural at the time to obey without question. Abel handed the cakes to Ediad, and I dutifully verified that both cakes were made the same way. She suggested that he cut one of the cakes in half, and she would take one piece and he'd take the other, just so he would know that they worked and weren't poisoned. Ediad thought it was a good idea, and used Abel's knife to cut the cake. Abel took the piece on the left and popped into her mouth. Ediad took the piece on the right and swallowed it more cautiously. Abel and all the bags she was carrying vanished from sight almost instantly. Nothing happened to Ediad. "Why did it work for the witch and not for me?" cried Ediad. "Because the diamond dust was only on the left-hand side of the blade," said the old alchemist through me. I felt her control lessening as the distance grew, and she hurried invisibly down the dark Aldrune street away from the rat and the pot. We never found Abel Credit or the diamond. Whether she completed her pilgrimage to Aldredania is anyone's guess. The cakes had no effect, except to give Ediad a bad case of droops that lasted for nearly a week. And the alchemist wins. Let's put that back. And now we're going to head to the Mages Guild, because the rest of the books are there.
Welcome. Please don't be shy.
Fedar's not shy.
I don't know where to begin. It is such an honor to meet you.
He's just got a lot to do.
I have a feeling you and
An
I are
honor,
about
to
to
be
become
sure.
very close.
Okay, let's see here. Next is the Lunar Lorkhan. The Lunar Lorkhan by Faldrune. I will not go into the varying accounts of what happened at Adamantine Tower, nor will I relate the war of manifest metaphors that rendered those stories unable to support most qualities of what is commonly known as narrative. We all have our favorite Lorkhan story, and our favorite Lorkhan motivation for the creation of Nirn, and our favorite story of what happened to his heart. But the theory of the Lunar Lorkhan is of special note. In short, the moons were and are the 2 halves of Lorkhan's flesh divinity. Like the rest of the gods, Lorkhan was a plane, or planet, that participated in the Great Construction. Except where the 8 lent portions of their heavenly bodies to create the mortal plane, or planet, Lorkhan's was cracked asunder and his divine spark fell to Nirn as a shooting star to impregnate it with the measure of its existence, and a reasonable amount of selfishness. Masser and Secunda, therefore, are the personifications of the dichotomy, the cloven duality, according to Artaeum, that Lorkhan legends often rail against. Ideas of the anima animus, good evil, being nothingness, the poetry of the body, throat and moan, silence as the abortive, and so on, set in the night sky as Lorkhan's constant reminder to his mortal issue of their duty. Followers of this theory hold that all other heart stories are mythical degradations of the true origin of the moons, and it needn't be said that they observe the hollow crescent theory as well. All right, let's put that back. Next is The Old Ways. The Old Ways by Solaris the Lore Master. We who know the Old Ways are well aware of the existence of a spiritual world invisible to the unenlightened. Just as one living in a kingdom but unaware of the political machinations underneath may see a new tax or battle preparation as the caprices of fortune, many observe floods, famines, and madness with helpless incomprehension. This is deplorable. As the great Quilin Darnesian moaned, the power of ignorance can shatter ebony like glass. What, after all, is the origin of these spiritual forces that move the invisible strings of Mundus? Any neophyte of Artaeum knows that these spirits are our ancestors, and that, while living, they too were bewildered by the spirits of their ancestors, and so on back to the original Acarii. The Daedra and gods to whom the common people turn are no more than the spirits of superior men and women whose power and passion granted them great influence in the afterworld. Certainly, this is our truth and our religion. But how does it help us in our sacred duty of Silifrenze, or providing grave and faithful counsel to lesser men? Primarily, it is easy to grasp the necessity both of endowing good men with great power and making powerful men good. We recognize the multiple threats that a strong tyrant represents. Breeds cruelty, which feeds the Daedra Boethia, and hatred, which feeds the Daedra Vernima. If he should die having performed a particularly malevolent act, he may go to rule in oblivion. And worst of all, he inspires other villains to thirst after power and other rulers to embrace villainy. Knowing this, we have developed patience in our dealings with such despots. They should be crippled, humiliated, impoverished, imprisoned. Other counselors may advocate assassination or warfare, which, aside from its spiritual insignificance, is expensive and likely to inflict at least as much pain on the innocents as the brutish dictator. No, we are intelligence gatherers, dignified diplomats, not revolutionaries. How then are our counselors faithful? We are faithful only to the old ways. It is essential always to remember the spiritual world while keeping our eyes open in the physical one. Performing the rites of Moawita on the 2nd of Hearthfire and the Vigild on the 1st of Second Seed are essential means of empowering salutary spirits and debilitating unclean ones. How then are we at once faithful to those we counsel and to the Isle of Artaeum? Perhaps the sage Teherete said it best. In Mundus, conflict and disparity are what bring change, and change is the most sacred of the 11 forces. Change is the force without focus or origin. It is the duty of the disciplined Psijic, or enlightened one, to dilute change where it brings greed, gluttony, sloth, ignorance, prejudice, cruelty. Here Teherete lists the rest of the 111 prodigalities, and to encourage change where it brings excellence, beauty, happiness, and enlightenment. As such, the faithful counsel has but one master, his mind. If the man the Psijic counsels acts wickedly and brings Oegnither, or bad change, and will otherwise not be counseled, it is the Psijic's duty to counterbalance the Oegnither by any means necessary. Emphasis mine. A student of the old ways may indeed ally himself to a lord, but it is a risky relationship. It cannot be stressed enough that the choice be wisely made. Should the lord refuse wise counsel and order the Psijic, to use Teherete's outmoded word, to perform an act contrary to the teachings of the old ways, there are few available options. The Psijic may obey, albeit unwillingly, and fall prey to the dark forces against which he has devoted his life. The Psijic may abandon his lord, which will bring shame on him and the Isle of Artaeum, and so may never be allowed home again. Or the Psijic may simply kill himself. Ah, yes. Well, I suppose that's one way to take care of things. Not quite what I was expecting, but okay. Right, next book is The Third Door. The Third Door by Ananar Orm. 1. I sing of Elibeth, the queen of the axe, who could fell a full elm with 2 hatchet hacks. She could rip apart Valenwood just for her fun. She studied under Alphadil in Tel Arun. He taught her the jabs, the strokes, and the stance to make an axe swing into an elegant dance. He taught her the barbed axes of the orcs bold, the 6-foot-long axes favored in Winterhold, the hollow-bladed axes of the elves of the west, which whistle when they swing through flesh. With a single-headed axe, she could behead 2 men. With a double-headed axe, she could fell more than 10. Yet where she lives in legend has most to do with the man who hacked her own heart in 2. 2. Nienolis Ulwarth the Mighty, who hailed from Blackrose, the only man who could best Elibeth with axe blows. In a minute, she chopped 50 trees, he 53. She felt at once that he was the only man for she. When she professed her love, Nienolis just laughed. He said he loved more his axe handle and shaft. And if they weren't enough to slake all his desire, there was another woman named Lauren Thyra. Fury gripped the queen of the axe, the maid Elibeth, and her thoughts turned to pondering musings of death. Mephala and Sheogorath gave her a revengeful scheme, and for weeks she worked on it in a state like a dream. In the still of the night, she kidnapped her rival, and then told her choices between doom and survival. 3. Lorinthira awoke in a house in the moors, in a room lightly furnished except for 3 doors. Elibeth explained that behind one of the doors the lass would find Elibeth sent her love, the great Nienolis. Behind the second lived a ravenous demon, and behind the third, an exit to freedom. She must choose a door, and to aid her decision, if she pondered too long, the axe'd make a division. Lorinthira wept, and Elibeth felt contrite, and opened the door to her immediate right. It led to the moors, and as she slipped through the gloom, she advised Lorinthira to likewise abandon the room. Lorinthira ignored her, and did not feel her will bend. Nienolis was largely behind the first door she opened. 4. Elibeth had lied. There was no demon of lore. The top third of Nienolis was behind the third door. No one likes to be rejected, but come on, Elibeth. Ugh. And lastly, we are reading this Unnamed Book. The problem with thieves today, said Letos, is the lack of technique. I know there's no honor among thieves, and there never was, but there used to be some pride, some skill, some basic creativity. It really makes those of us with a sense of history despair. Imolen sneered, slamming down his flagon of grief violently on the rough-hewn table. Bevek, what do you want us to say? You asks us, what do you do when you see a guard? And I says, stab the fetcher in the back. What do you prefer? We challenge him to a game of chits? So much ambition, so little education, said Letos with a sigh. My dear friends, we aren't mugging some Nord tourist fresh off the ferry. The Cobbler's Guildhall may not sound intimidating, but tonight, when the dues collection is housed there before being sent to the bank, the security's going to be tighter than a Quama's ass. You can't just stab at every back you encounter and expect to make it into the vaults. Why don't you explain specifically what you'd like us to do? Asked Galzaya calmly, trying to keep the tone of the group down. Most locals at the Plot and Plaster Corner Club in Tel Arun knew enough not to listen in, but she knew better than to take any chances. The common thief, said Letos, pouring himself more grief, warming to his subject, sticks his dagger in his opponent's back. This may slay the target, but more often gives him time to scream and drenches the attacker with blood. Not good. Now, a good throat slashing, properly executed, can both slay and silence a guard and leave the thief relatively blood-free. And after all, after the robbery, we don't want people seeing a bunch of blood-soaked butchers running through the streets. Even in Tellerun, that's likely to warrant suspicion. If you can catch your victim lying down asleep or resting, you are in an excellent position. You place one hand over the mouth with your thumb under the chin, then you use your other hand to slit the throat and quickly turn the head to one side so the body bleeds out away from you. There is a risk here of becoming bloodstained if you don't move the head quickly enough. If you're unsure, strangle the victim first to avoid the blood that tends to spurt out in 3-foot jets when someone is stabbed while alive. A very good friend of mine, a thief in Nisus whose name I won't mention, swears by the strangle and slash technique. Simply put, you grab your victim's throat from behind, and while throttling him, you batter his face against the opposite wall. When the victim is thus rendered unconscious, you slash his throat while still holding him from behind, and the risk of staining one's clothes with blood is practically non-existent. The classic technique, which requires less grappling than my friend's variation, is to place one hand over the victim's mouth and then saw through the throat in 3 or 4 strokes, rather like playing a violin. It requires little effort, and while there's quite a bit of blood, it all jets forward away from you. There's no reason, when one knows one is going to be slitting some throats, not to take some precautions and bring some extra equipment. The best neck hackers I know generally carry a bit of wadded cloth on the aft side of their knives to keep blood from getting on their cuffs. It's impractical for this sort of assignment, but when you're only anticipating 1 or 2 victims, nothing beats throwing a sack over the target's head, drawing the string tight, and then supplying the killing blow, or blows. Imolen laughed loudly. "Can I see a demonstration sometime?" "Very soon," said Ledos, "if Galzaya has done her job." Galzaya brought out the map of the guildhouse, freshly stolen, and they began to detail out the strategy. The last several hours had been a whirlwind to all. In less than a day, the 3 had met, formulated a plan, bought or stolen the necessary ingredients, and were about to execute it. Not one of the 3 were sure whether confidence or stupidity were driving the other 2, but the fates were aligned. The guildhouse was going to be robbed. When the sun set, Ledos, Galzaya, and Imolen approached the cobbler's guildhouse on the east end of town. Galzaya used her cachot of stoneflower to mask their scent from the guard wolves as the 3 passed over the parapets. She also acted as lead scout, and Ledos was impressed. For someone of relative inexperience, she knew her way through shadows. Ledos's expertise was demonstrated a dozen times, and the guards were of such a diverse variety, he was able to demonstrate all the means of silent assassination he had developed over the years. Imolen opened the vault in his unique and systematic method. As the tumblers fell beneath his fingers, he softly sang an old dirty tavern song about the 99 loves of Boethia. He said it helped him focus and organize difficult combinations. Within seconds, the vault was open and the gold was in hand. They left the guildhouse an hour after they entered. No alarm had been raised, the gold was gone, and corpses lay pooling blood on the stone floors within. "Well done, my friends, well done. You learned well," Ledos said as he poured the gold pieces into the specially designed compartments in his tunic's sleeves, where they held fast with no jingling or unusual bulges. "We'll meet back at the Plot and Plaster tomorrow morning and split up the bounty." The group parted ways. The only person who knew the most covert route through the city's sewer system, Ledos, slipped in through a duct and vanished below. Galzaya threw on her shawl, muddied her face to resemble an old flaw fortune-teller, and headed north. Imolen headed east into the park, trusting his unnatural senses to keep him away from the city watch. "Now I teach them the greatest lesson of all," thought Ledos as he sloshed through the labyrinthine tunnels of sludge. His guar was waiting where he left it at the city gates, making a laconic lunch of the chokeweed shrub to which it had been leashed. On the road to Vivek, he thought of Galzaya and Imolen. Perhaps they had been caught and brought in for questioning already. It was a pity he couldn't see them undergoing interrogation. Who would break under pressure first? Imolen was certainly the tougher of the 2, but Galzaya doubtless had hidden reserves. It was merely intellectual curiosity. They thought his name was Ledos, and he was meeting them at the Plot and Plaster. The authorities wouldn't therefore be looking for a Dunmer named Sathis celebrating his wealth miles and miles away in Vivek. As he prodded his mount forward and the sun began rising, Sathis pictured GotY and Imolen not undergoing interrogation, but sleeping the good, deep sleep of the wicked, dreaming of how they would spend their share of the gold. Both would wake up early and rush to the plot and plaster. He could see them now, Imolen laughing and carrying on, GotY hushing him to avoid bringing undue attention. They would take a couple flagons of grief, perhaps order a meal, a big one, and wait. Hours would pass, and so would their moods. The chain of reactions that every betrayed person exhibits. Nervousness, doubt, bewilderment, anger. The sun was fully risen when Sathis reached the stables of his house on the outskirts of Vivec. He reined in his guar and filled its feed. The rest of the stalls were empty. It wouldn't be until that afternoon when his servants returned from the Feast of St. Realms in Nisus. They were good people, and he treated them well, but from past experience he knew that servants talked. If they began to connect his absences with thefts in other towns, it was only a matter of time before they would go to the authorities or blackmail him. After all, they were human. It was best in the long run to give them a week off with pay whenever he was out of town on business. He slipped the gold into the vault in his study and went upstairs. The schedule had been tight, but Sathis had given himself a few hours to rest before his household returned. His own bed was wonderfully soft and warm compared to the dreadful mattress he had to use at the canton until a run. Sathis woke up sometime later from a nightmare. For a second after he opened his eyes, he thought he could still hear Imolen's voice nearby, singing the 99 Loves of Boethia. He lay still in his bed, waiting, but there was no sound except the usual creaks and groans of his old house. Afternoon sunlight came through his bedroom window in ribbons, catching dust. He closed his eyes. The song returned, and Sathis heard the vault door in his study swing open. The smell of stoneflower filled his nose, and he opened his eyes. Only a little of the afternoon sunlight could pierce the inside of the burlap sack. A strong feminine hand clamped over the mouth, and a thumb jabbed under his chin. Just as his throat opened and his head was shoved to the side, he heard GotY in her typical calm voice. "Thank you for the lesson, Sathis." Thanks for the lesson indeed. Sathis had it coming. Alright, now we want to get back
I
to...
have a feeling you and I are about to become very close.
Well, you're incorrect, because I'm out of here.
I don't know where...
Fedar needs to make his way back to Narmoc, now that he has finished his reading, for now. And as it turns out, the best way I can come up with to get there is to hoof it down to Hlaod and take a boat back to Narmoc. So that's what we're gonna do. And I'm not gonna bother fighting the Kwama Forager. I don't care. That is out of scope for this mission. Fedar just needs to move along. Past many familiar sights. The sky is really pretty. Keep your eyes in front, Fedar. Kinda. Looking up all the time. That is nice. Whoa! What? Okay. And suddenly, night! That's okay. If I recall, this is kind of a shortcut to Hlaod. Oh good, rain. Not great for visibility, but well, I still like it. That's Hlaod right there. Excellent. Yes, yes. Boom, boom, boom. Hi there. Please take me to Fedar Moc. Cool. Now we can, yeah, they do. Now we can see the place in the daytime, kinda. But I guess we'll do that in the next video. As for this video, we just read First Seed, Book 3 of 2920, the last year of the First Era, The Cake and the Diamond, The Lunar Lorkhan, The Old Ways, The Third Door, and an unnamed book. The adventure continues next time. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you then.